Welcome to U.S. Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Donald Trump's second term would be a protectionist nightmare. Here are the public figures that scare Americans the most. CNN poll: Trump dominates South Carolina GOP primary, with Haley a clear but distant second. There can be no AI regulation without corporate transparency. Apple warns Indian opposition and journalists of state-backed hacking. Donald Trump's second term would be a protectionist nightmare. Economist. Former U.S. President Donald Trump's protectionist trade policies, which included imposing numerous tariffs on imports, had a negative impact on the American economy, according to The Economist. The direct costs of the tariffs, which functioned as a tax on consumers, hurt most producers and contributed to inflation. The tariffs also strained America's relationships with its allies and threatened the global trade system. Despite these negative outcomes, Trump has indicated that if he were to win the 2024 presidential election, he would implement a universal tariff of 10% on all imports and respond to any high tariffs placed on American goods with the same tariff. This would likely result in other countries imposing their own tariffs on American goods and would lead to a decline in international commerce. Economists estimate that a global tariff war would shrink U.S. GDP by about 1%. In addition to the economic consequences, a universal tariff would also undermine the World Trade Organization's role in dispute settlement, as the Trump administration blocked appointments to its appellate body in 2019. The Economist argues that if Trump were to implement a universal tariff, it would have serious and enduring consequences for global trade. Here are the public figures that scare Americans the most. Washington Post. A recent poll conducted by YouGov asked Americans about their views on various public figures, ranking them according to gender, age, and political party. The aim was to determine which public figures Americans would least like to have visit their homes on Halloween. The rankings varied depending on the demographic group being considered. The least liked public figures included Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former President Donald Trump, and House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. The rankings also revealed that many public figures are not strongly disliked by any particular demographic group, often because people either don't care about them or don't know enough to have an opinion. The article notes that public opinion is subjective and that individuals may have their own personal views that differ from their demographic group. It concludes by suggesting that politicians and other public figures can be truly frightening. Overall, the article highlights the subjective nature of public opinion and how it can vary depending on individual preferences and circumstances. It also emphasizes the potential for public figures, particularly politicians, to be viewed negatively by certain groups of people. CNN poll: Trump dominates South Carolina GOP primary, with Haley a clear but distant second. CNN. A CNN poll has found that former U.S. President Donald Trump has majority support in South Carolina, an early primary state, with 53% of likely Republican primary voters in the state choosing him as their first choice for the 2024 GOP presidential nomination. Trump's closest rival is Nikki Haley, the state's former governor, who has 22% support. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis received support from 11% of respondents, while South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, who is focusing his campaign on Iowa, received 6%. No other candidate received more than 2% support. Trump's support in South Carolina is slightly lower than his national polling numbers, but it is more solid than his rival's support. 82% of his current supporters say that they will definitely vote for him, compared to 42% for Haley and 38% for DeSantis. Trump also leads Haley by 50 percentage points among likely voters without a college degree, and by 40 points among Republicans. Trump also has widespread support among likely voters under the age of 45, those who describe themselves as very conservative, and those in households earning less than $50,000 annually. There can be no AI regulation without corporate transparency. Financial Times. Transparency is essential for successful AI accountability, as it allows researchers to assess foundational models for bias or security threats and enables regulators and the public to understand the risks associated with AI technologies, according to Mariette Schock, International Policy Director at Stanford University's Cyber Policy Center. She argues that the lack of transparency around AI models gives corporate leaders disproportionate influence over politicians' understanding of the technology, and that transparency standards and data access for researchers should be prioritized in AI regulation. Apple warns Indian opposition and journalists of state-backed hacking. Washington Post. Apple has warned at least 20 high-profile figures in India, including opposition politicians and journalists, that they have been targeted by state-sponsored cyber attacks. The development has led to allegations that the government is using electronic surveillance against its domestic political rivals and critics. Those targeted include members of parliament from several opposition parties, journalists critical of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party-led government, and the head of a government-linked think tank in New Delhi. The Indian government has not been named as the perpetrator in the hacking attempts, and Apple has not confirmed if the attempts were successful. Donald Trump lender Axos hits back against short sellers. Financial Times. Axos Financial has taken action against short sellers who have questioned its past dealings with cryptocurrency companies and former President Donald Trump. Short selling in the bank's shares has risen 190% this year, making Axos one of the most heavily shorted regional banks in the U.S. Shares in the bank fell approximately 5% after it confirmed it had taken $235 million in deposits from crypto companies, including Binance US. However, Axos CEO Greg Garrabrants said the bank had decided to halt its expansion into crypto, closed the accounts and returned the funds. The bank has not revealed its dealings with Trump, one of its largest borrowers, and has not been required to do so. Axos has grown quickly, increasing lending by 50% over the past 3 years. Its shares have fallen just 7% this year, whereas the KBW Nasdaq Regional Bank Index has dropped around 26%. JetBlue's Spirit deal painted as attempt to eliminate low-cost rival. Bloomberg. A U.S. Justice Department lawyer has said that JetBlue's $3.8 billion acquisition of Spirit Airlines is an effort to get rid of a low-cost rival and boost ticket prices across a wider network of flights. JetBlue's lawyer said that the deal was needed for the two small carriers to better compete with larger rivals. The case is the latest effort by the U.S. federal government to crack down on airline consolidation after decades of lax enforcement that left 4 airlines with 80% of the market. Canada backs Ukraine's entry to CPTPP, Trade Minister says. Nikkei Asia. Canada's Trade Minister, Mary Ng, has expressed her country's support for Ukraine's bid to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. Ng praised the new Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, which she said had provisions on par with those of Canada's free trade agreements with the EU and the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Canada has seen its trade with CPTPP members increase by 10% and with Japan by 23%. China, Taiwan, and the UK have also applied to join the trade pact. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your favorite observer from the 6 Degrees World, Dr. Six, bringing you the latest news and insights from around the globe. So grab your popcorn and get ready for some witty analysis. First up, we have The Economist warning us about the nightmare that would be Donald Trump's second term. His protectionist trade policies during his first term already had a negative impact on the American economy, and now he's talking about implementing a universal tariff on all imports. This would not only hurt the American economy even more, but also strain relationships with allies and threaten the global trade system. It's like watching a horror movie sequel that you never asked for. Next, The Washington Post gives us a fun little poll about the public figures that scare Americans the most. Surprise, surprise, Donald Trump is near the top of the list. But let's not forget the other spooktacular figures like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. Public opinion can be a scary thing, my friends, and politicians can truly be the stuff of nightmares. Speaking of Trump, a CNN poll reveals that he's dominating the GOP primary in South Carolina. With 53% support, he's leaving his rivals in the dust. Nikki Haley comes in second with 22% support, but it's clear that Trump's grip on the Republican base is still strong. It's like he's the Freddy Krueger of politics, haunting his opponents' dreams. Now, let's dive into the world of AI. The Financial Times tells us that there can be no AI regulation without corporate transparency. Transparency is essential for holding AI systems accountable and assessing any biases or security threats. Without it, corporate leaders have too much influence over the understanding and regulation of AI. So let's shed some light on those AI models and make sure they're not hiding any monsters. In a shocking turn of events, Apple has warned high-profile figures in India that they have been targeted by state-sponsored cyber attacks. This has raised concerns about government surveillance and the targeting of political rivals and critics. It's like a real-life techno-thriller, with Apple playing the role of the hero warning the potential victims. On a lighter note, Axos Financial is fighting back against short sellers who questioned its dealings with cryptocurrency companies and Donald Trump. Short selling in the bank's shares has surged, but the bank has clarified that it has returned funds from crypto companies and has not revealed its dealings with Trump. It's like a financial drama with a twist, keeping us on the edge of our seats. Lastly, Bloomberg brings us a juicy story about JetBlue's acquisition of Spirit Airlines. The U.S. Justice Department is claiming that this deal is an attempt to eliminate a low-cost rival and increase ticket prices. It's like a battle of the airlines, with the government stepping in to stop the consolidation and protect consumers. And there you have it, my dear viewers. A roundup of the latest news and my take on it all. Now it's your turn to join the discussion. What are your thoughts on Trump's protectionist nightmare, the public figures that scare Americans, or any other story that caught your attention? Let's hear it. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.